Hey besties, it is your girl Elena. Usually when we read ancient romance novels, when the female lead gets her engagement broken or divorced by a heartless man, she always cries and makes a scene or relies on scheming to fight off the mistress. Right? But today, our female-led Jiangnan was a top financial advisor before transmigrating, when the cold-faced heartless general threw divorce papers and a thick stack of banknotes in her face. Guess what happened? She didn't cry, make a fuss, or threaten suicide. Instead, she was mentally smashing that calculator, signed at light speed, and ran off to cash out overnight. Let's dive in. These shops on East Street, the farmland outside the city, and these 20,000 taels in silver notes, they're all yours. As long as you're willing to sign the divorce papers. Shen Yao's voice was as cold as a blade quenched in ice during the 12th lunar month. He sat upright in that rosewood armchair symbolizing the authority of the general's manor, pushing a freshly inked divorce agreement, along with a thick stack of property deeds and large denomination promissory notes, contemptuously toward me in an almost charitable gesture. The room was heated with the finest silver jan thread charcoal, yet it couldn't warm up this suffocating atmosphere. His gaze didn't even want to linger on me for a moment, but instead passed over me, landing on that embroidered screen not far away. Behind the screen, a slender and delicate figure was faintly visible, occasionally letting out a couple of suppressed coughs. That was his beloved white moonlight, Lin Wanru. I didn't say anything, just stared quietly at that stack of papers on the table representing a massive fortune. Under my sleeves, me fingertips were trembling slightly. This wasn't because I was heartbroken, but because of extreme, barely controllable excitement. As a top-tier financial advisor who'd been grinding away on Wall Street in the Mouse century, I had just won the industry's highest award after a celebration banquet for a merger and acquisition deal worth tens of billions, only to collapse from overwork at my desk, piled high with reports. The moment I opened my eyes, I transmigrated into this ancient romance novel called The General's Deep Affection, becoming the melancholic original owner lying before me, Yon Sai, who had just recovered from a serious illness and poured her entire fortune into a one-jan-sided love. After absorbing the original owner's memories, I really wanted to ask if her brain had been fried. The original owner was originally a tiger daughter from a military family. Her father was the late General Yun, who died for his country, leaving behind a grand dowry procession 10 li long and a massive estate. But she just had to be a hopeless romantic fool, willing to lower herself for Shen Yao. This battle-gen hardened, yet cold-gen faced general, whose heart belonged to someone else, even going so far as to do housework and use her mother's dowry to fill the financial holes in the general's manor. And what was her final outcome? In the novel, she exhausted herself, her family fortune depleted, watching Shen Yao and Lin Wanru become a loving couple, while she herself died miserably of illness in a drafty back courtyard, not even getting a decent funeral. General Shen, are you sure that all of this belongs to me? I suddenly snapped back to reality, quickly lowering my eyelids to desperately conceal the laughter that was about to spill from my eyes. I deliberately lowered my voice, trying hard to make my tone carry a hint of hoarseness and trembling born from extreme grief. Seeing my meek and submissive appearance, Shen Yao's brows furrowed even tighter, the look of disgust in his eyes flowing out undisguisedly. Wanru has a gentle and tranquil nature, like a snow lotus on a high mountain, and dislikes most these vulgar money matters reeking of copper stench. These are originally the Shen family's compensation to you, Shen Yao said coldly, his tone carrying a lofty arrogance. Plus the dowry list you brought over back then? I've also had someone inventory it all. Not a penny of yours is missing. As long as you stop pestering her from now on and stop targeting Wanru at every turn, you can take all this and live peacefully. Yunsi, own must know contentment. Contentment? I almost burst out laughing. Compensation. This isn't compensation. This is heaven, seeing how exhausted I was in my previous life, and specially arranging targeted poverty relief for me. Although the Great Zhou dynasty's social customs are relatively open, allowing men and women to divorce by mutual consent, some are known like Shen Yao, who, to make room for a high-den-minded white moonlight, would throw out more than half of the Shen family's assets and all their liquid capital without batting an eye. Such a sucker is absolutely one of a kind in the entire capital. Did he think Lin Wanru could survive on dew alone? Did he think the hundreds of mouths in the general's manor were fed by the northwest wind? He had no idea that without the secret subsidies from the original host's dowry, his meager military officer's salary couldn't even cover 3 months' worth of charcoal expenses for this estate. All right. I sniffled, took a deep breath, and reached out to extract the purple Dan-haired brush from the brush holder with perfect precision. The brush tip soaked in thick ink, and as it swept across the signature section of the divorce agreement, I could almost hear the delightful sound of gold ingots clinking against each other. Since the General and Miss Lin are so well matched in affection, if I continue to be obstinate, I'd only appear ungrateful. Modern workplace rule number 1. When facing non-gem performing assets that constantly drain energy, you must divest promptly and secure your gains. Sign, seal, and press down the bright red fingerprint. The entire sequence was executed in one fluid motion, smooth as flowing clouds and water, without the slightest hesitation. Shen Yao seemed stunned. He was probably accustomed to the original host's usual dramatics of crying, making scenes, and threatening suicide, accustomed to that kind of humble begging. Suddenly seeing me so resolute, a flash of bewilderment crossed his eyes, as if he'd thrown a punch into cotton and hit nothing but empty air. Yun Si Yu. He moved his lips, brows tightly knit, his tone carrying a hint of doubt that even he hadn't noticed, as if suspecting I was playing hard to get. Lord Shen. I swiftly split the divorce agreement in two, pushing one copy in front of him while sweeping the other copy along with the property deed shop contracts, and 20,000 taels of flying money on the table into my sleeve with lightning speed. Even my form of address changed instantly, without waiting for him to finish speaking. Since the divorce agreement is signed, there is no longer any connection between you and me. The Great Zhou's household and marriage law states it clearly. Once separated, both parties are free, each finding their own joy. I stood up, looking down at him from above, my eyes clear without a trace of affection. I won't stay in this general's manor a moment longer, lest I dirty Miss Lin's eyes. I wish Lord Shen and Miss Lin a happy union for 100 years. Cherish each other well, and do not let each other down. I turned and walked away, my skirt embroidered with intricate patterns sweeping through the air in a sharp arc, every step revealing the jubilation of someone about to strike it rich. Behind me, Shen Yao watched my resolute departing figure, his face ashen, and the coughing sound from behind the screen seemed to pause for a moment as well. Returning to Wutong Courtyard where the original owner lived, Kuai Wei, the senior maid from my dowry, had already cried herself into a puddle of tears. Seeing the divorce agreement stamped with the general's manor seal in my hand, her legs went weak and she knelt on the ground, sobbing. "Madam, how could you really sign it? Leaving the general's manor, how will we survive from now on? Those estates and shops. We're just orphans and widows, if others set their eyes on them. How could we possibly hold on to them? Live, we're not just going to live, we're going to live so well that everyone in the capital will be green with envy." I let out a cold laugh and strode quickly to the table, pouring myself a cup of cold tea and gulping it down to suppress the excitement in my heart. I slapped my palm on the table, cutting off Kuai Wei's crying. "Stop wailing. Tears won't turn into real gold and silver. Go quickly and bring out the dowry list from back then, along with those land deeds Shen Yao just gave me. Bring them all out." Kuai Wei was stunned by the sudden burst of authority from me, and scrambled to open the redwood camphor chest, pulling out a thick stack of account books and property deeds. I rapidly flipped through these asset certificates. The Great Zhou dynasty had a thriving commercial sector, and the money houses ancient banks. In the capital all had powerful backers, making them extremely efficient. I calculated quickly in my mind. The 20,000 taels in flying cash that Shen Yao gave me was liquid funds I could use any time. The shops on East Street were in an excellent location, but couldn't be taken away. The farmland outside the city was even more of a fixed asset. I knew all too well the deep-down-rooted flaws of men like Shen Yao, right? Now he felt he owed me and was eager to show his magnanimity in front of his white moonlight. so he was quick to hand over the money. But what if one day that delicate and helpless Lin Wanru whispered a few words in his ear, saying she had no jewelry to wear, or that the household couldn't make ends meet? There was no guarantee this man wouldn't lose face and go back on his word, or even use his military authority to confiscate my assets. The night is long and dreams are many. I must cash out immediately. Taking advantage of the still early night, I summoned several loyal old servants left behind by my maternal family. These people had once followed General Yun onto the battlefield, and after retirement had been managing the outer courtyard for me, absolutely loyal. Uncle Lin, Uncle Zhao. I slammed the divorce papers on the table, my gaze sharp as a torch sweeping over everyone. This is the divorce paper, personally signed by General Shen from tonight on. I am no longer a woman of the Shen family. I am a daughter of the Yun family. Several old servants looked at each other, eyes full of shock, but it quickly turned into excitement. Uncle Lin's eyes reddened slightly. Miss, you've finally come around. If the old general's spirit in heaven knew you were no longer suffering this injustice, he would surely be comforted. Enough talk, we have a tough battle to fight tonight. I calmly delegated tasks, displaying the absolute command of a former Dan life market operator. Uncle Lin, take people, and immediately notify the capital's largest Tongbao exchange house and the top 3 pawnshop managers. Tell them the Yun family has big business. Have them bring sufficient flying cash and come appraise things overnight. Uncle Zhao, take a few people and get the deeds for the East Street shops and the land properties outside the city ready. Go overnight to find the capital's biggest broker and tell him I'm selling these properties urgently. I paused for a moment, my eyes becoming incredibly sharp. Remember my bottom line, move quickly, absolute secrecy. Sell as fast as possible, dropping the price by 20%, or even 30% is fine. Before dawn, you want to convert all the immovable dead objects, bulky rosewood furniture, antique calligraphy and paintings that I can't take with me into nationally accepted flying money, and easy den-to-den carry light and soft gold leaves. The old servants gasped lower by 30%. That would be a loss of tens of thousands of taels of silver. Miss, this is too much of a loss. A loss, leaving them here to be seized by Shen Yao if he goes back on his word, Jian. That is what you call losing everything. I interrupted sternly. Do as I say. Go, seeing the sharpness and decisiveness in my eyes that had never been there before. The old servants felt the long lost bearing of a military family and clasped their fists in unison. Yes, we obey your command. That night, the back gate of Wutong Court quietly opened, and inconspicuous horse carriages drove in one after another like ghosts. The manager of the capital's largest pawnshop was dug out of his bed, originally full of resentment, but when he saw the rosewood furniture filling the entire courtyard, the imperially bestowed coral trees, and boxes of shoe brocade, his eyes turned green. Miss Yun Thies, you really want to convert them all to cash overnight? The manager wiped his cold sweat. Fixed price, 50,000 taels in flying money, plus 1,000 taels of gold. All yours, settle everything within half a shikan, or I'll find another shop. I sat in the grand armchair, toying with a muttoned and fat jade teacup in my hand, my tone brooking no argument. The shopkeeper's mental abacus clicked rapidly. If he sold this batch slowly, he could get at least 80,000 taels. He gritted his teeth. Deal. Third watch of the night, in the wee hours. Shen Yao was probably holding his delicate Wanru right now, nestled in the warm canopy bed, pouring out their hearts to each other and imagining a beautiful future without me. They saw of a legitimate wife in the way. As for me, I had already changed under the lamplight into a neat moon-gem white cross, Jan collar narrow Jan sleeved short jacket, me long hair bound high and secured with a simple jade hairpin. Without makeup, I appeared full of heroic spirit, like a sharp sword about to be unsheathed. On the table lay a thick stack of flying money certificates, guaranteed by the 4 great merchant houses of the Great Zhou dynasty, totaling a full 120,000 taels. Beside it was a small bundle stuffed full of heavy gold leaves and broken silver. Miss, the carriage and guards are all ready. As you instructed, we've spent heavily to hire the most reliable Weiyuan escort agency in the capital, 30 skilled men to escort us to the canal pier outside the city. Kuai carried the bundle on her back, her expression somewhat anxious, but more infected by my excitement for the unknown life ahead. I nodded and turned back for one last look at the imposing general's manor that had trapped the original owner for 3 years. In the dark night, the main gate was tightly shut, and the red lanterns under the eaves swayed in the cold wind, exuding an air of impending decline and desolation. Without the support of the original owner's massive dowry, Shen Yao's meager military officer's salary simply couldn't sustain this mansion that was gilded on the outside, but rotten within. In less than 3 months, Lin Wenru would learn just how pathetic it would be when a white moonlight fell into the mundane world of daily necessities. Let's go to Jiangnan. The sound of the carriage wheels turning was especially clear on the silent bluestone paved street. I leaned against the soft cushions of the carriage, casually flipping through the thick stack of flying money I had just exchanged. The Great Zhou dynasty had a well-developed water system, with canals leading directly to Jiangnan. Jiangnan was prosperous and its commerce thriving. That was the paradise for capital operations. In the modern world, I had done wealth appreciation for countless top tycoons. In this life, I would use this generous startup capital to personally build a commercial empire of my own. As for love, that kind of illusory ethereal thing that also required looking at a man's mood, how could it compare to the solid reassurance of heavy gold? From now on, the sky's the limit. Shen Yaoyu, just stay with your delicate white moonlight who can't take care of herself, and watch how I make my grand ambitions come true in this prosperous world. At the break of dawn, a huge merchant ship slowly departed from the capital's dock under the escort of Weiyuan Escort Agency, racing toward the misty rain-soaked Jiangnan along the Grand Canal. At this moment in the general's manor, Shen Yao had just woken up to a series of urgent knocking on the door. The old butler stumbled and knelt outside the door, his voice filled with desperate sobs. "General, this is terrible. The Madame No Miss Yun cleared out Wutong courtyard overnight. Even the precious flowers and plants in the courtyard were dug up and sold. The shop on East Street and the manor outside the city have also changed hands overnight." Shen Yao suddenly pushed open the door. Cold wind rushed in. He looked at the empty back courtyard in disbelief, feeling everything go dark before his eyes. The rain in Jiangnan, unlike that in the capital with its bone-jan chilling cold, always carried a gentle moistness, as if even the air was filled with the fragrance of powder and tea. Half a month later, my merchant ship docked steadily at Yangzhou City's largest port. "Miss, look, this Yangzhou City is truly prosperous, even more lively than the capital." Kuai lifted the curtain of the cabin, looking at the rows of shops on the shore and the endless stream of people. Her eyes full of amazement, having long since cast the panic from leaving the capital to the back of her mind. I stood on the deck, took a deep breath of the moist air of Jiangnan, felt the thick stack of flying money in my sleeve pocket, and a smile of certain victory curved at the corners of my lips. Money, leisure, and no heartless lover. This is what life should be. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in the capital's general's mansion, a disaster of earthquake proportions was unfolding. Shen Yao sat in his study, staring at the mountains of account books before him, all empty, his face ironed and blue like frost in the depths of winter. "What did you say?" "There is less than 50 taels of broken silver left in the accounts." Shen Yao grabbed the old steward by the collar, veins bulging on his forehead. "That heartless Yun Si not only sold off all her dowry, but didn't even leave enough for next month's charcoal money." The old steward trembled all over, his face full of misery as he replied, "General, you don't know the full story. These past 3 years, while you were away at war, the mansion had hundreds of mouths to feed, people and horses to maintain, plus all those social obligations with your colleagues. It was all subsidized by Miss Yun using her own dowry and private funds. Know that she is gone, she even sold the shops on East Street and the estates outside the city to the brokers. Our general's mansion is nothing but an empty shell now." Shen Yao was struck as if by lightning, slumping dejectedly into the Grand Master's chair. He had always thought that the general's mansion's fine clothes and delicacies were a matter of course. He thought Yun-si was just a vulgar woman reeking of money who only knew how to scheme. It wasn't until this moment, when the heavy burden of daily necessities came crashing down on his head, that he suddenly realized how much that woman had once held up. Just then, the study door was gently pushed open. Lin Wanru walked in carrying a bowl of watery bird's nest soup. She was still wearing that plain white dress, her brows slightly furrowed, looking pitifully delicate and fragile. Yao Gega, don't be angry anymore. Sister Yoon is just upset right now. Once she realizes how hard life is outside, she'll naturally come back and beg you. Lin Wanru placed the bird's nest on the table, her voice so soft it seemed water could be wrung from it. Wanru doesn't understand those matters of money. I only wish for Yao Jiangege's good health. In the past, Shen Yao would have definitely pulled her into his arms with heartache and cursed Yuan Sai for being inconsiderate. But today, when Shen Yao looked at that bowl of extremely poor quality bird's nest soup that even had 2 stray hairs floating in it, an inexplicable irritation suddenly welled up in his heart. You don't understand money matters, but there are hundreds of mouths to feed in this household. Shen Yao suddenly stood up, his tone carrying a resentment even he himself hadn't noticed. Wanru, since you've taken over the household management, why can't you even pay the servants' monthly wages? Why did the cloth shop owner come to the door yesterday to collect payment for the clothes you ordered? Lin Wanru's eyes widened in disbelief, her eyes instantly reddening as tears streamed down her face. Brother Yao Yu, are you blaming me? I was originally someone who lived a life of pure cultivation. You were the one who insisted on bringing me into the household. Those account books are so densely packed, I get dizzy just looking at them. Besides, yesterday when I went outside the city to distribute porridge, it was also to earn the general's household a good reputation. Distribute porridge? You used the household's last money for buying rice to distribute porridge? Shen Yao laughed in extreme anger, looking at this white moonlight, before him who only knew how to cry and had no common sense about life. He suddenly felt that holy filter shatter into pieces. Without financial support, the lofty white moonlight was nothing more than a useless person who couldn't even understand account books and only caused trouble. Poor couples quarrel over everything. Shen Yao and Lin Wanru's mutual blame and torment had only just begun. The chaos in the capital, I naturally had no way of knowing. Nor did I care. After arriving in Yangzhou, he didn't rush to buy a mansion for retirement like other retired officials or wealthy merchants. What I wanted to do was make money breed money. After 3 days of covert investigation, I set my sights on a 3-den-story waterfront restaurant on the verge of bankruptcy by the slender West Lake. The location was excellent with beautiful scenery, but due to the previous owner's poor management and outdated dishes, it had fallen to the point where you could catch sparrows at the door. I directly threw down 5,000 taels of flying money, didn't even haggle, and acquired the deed on the spot, renaming it Cloud Beyond Tower. Miss, we've torn down all the partitions in the first Dan floor hall and built such a big stage. Will this really work? This doesn't look like a proper place to eat. It looks more like a pleasure house. Kwai Wei looked at the wood shavings all over the floor and the demolished carved partitions. Feeling so distressed, she kept twitching. Restaurants in the Great Zhou valued elegance and quietness. Few made such drastic changes like I did, turning the main hall into something like a theatre. Kwai Wei, this is called immersive experience. I walked around the spacious hall, pointing at the elevated platform cleared out in the middle, me eyes gleaming with a merchant's shrewdness. No tables or chairs there. In the afternoon, go invite Yangzhou City's best storyteller to tell romance of the 3 kingdoms and water margin, making it blood-gen pumping and exciting. In the evening, go invite Jiangnan's most elegant musicians and famous courtesans to play instruments and sing, selling only art, not bodies. The second floor will have elegant seating separated by light gauze. The third floor will have enclosed VIP private rooms, absolutely protecting privacy. Most importantly, we won't sell common mass Dan market dishes. We'll only sell seasonal limited editions and will operate on a membership system. Ancient business practices were mostly honest, adhering to the principle that good wine needs no bush. but they lacked the ruthless edge and tactics of modern commercial society's marketing. I'm going to use 21st century business thinking to deliver a complete dimensional strike to the natives of the Great Zhou dynasty. Half a month before opening, I didn't rush to buy ingredients or hire chefs. Instead, I first posted notices around Yangzhou City, recruiting a group of poor scholars who had repeatedly failed the Imperial examinations and were down on their luck with high salaries. I didn't make them do manual labor. I specifically had them sit in the back courtyard, writing allusions and drawing menus for each and every dish at Cloud Dam Beyond Tower. An ordinary steamed white fish had to be paired with a poem by Li Bai. A braised pork dish had to be named Dongpo Jade Oriole, and accompanied by Su Dongpo's biographical anecdotes written in small, regular script. The names should be as elegant as possible, and the stories should be as extraordinary as they could be fabricated. Not only that, I also had the print shop work through the night to print tens of thousands of beautifully worded flyers bearing the Cloud Dam Beyond Tower logo. I hired children from the city to distribute them all over the streets. In no time before Cloud Dam Beyond Tower even opened, its mysterious and elegant reputation had already spread throughout the streets and alleys of Yangzhou City via the flyers. Everyone knew that a divine restaurant had opened by Slender West Lake, where one could not only dine, but also listen to music, watch opera, and appreciate poetry. On opening day, Yunwei Tower was bustling with visitors, with almost all the wealthy and prominent merchants of Yangzhou City in attendance. I retreated behind the screen of a private room on the second floor, changed into a sleek purple manager's outfit, leisurely sipped premium Baluochan tea while fingering the rosewood abacus in my hand, coldly observing the movements below. Commerce was already flourishing in the Great Zhou dynasty, and what the wealthy merchants of Jiangnan lacked least was money. What they lacked was face and novelty. And Yunwei Tower precisely grasped their pain point of one-gen upmanship. Just as the music from the Qin in the first Dan floor hall was flowing like water, with everyone listening in rapture, an extremely discordant sound of table Dan slapping suddenly interrupted the elegant music at the banquet. Bang! This is the sojan called One Spoonful Captures the Soul Buddha Jumps Over the Wall. I'd say it is nothing special daring to sell a pot of soup for 50 taels of silver. You must be taking us for suckers. A frivolous and arrogant provocation rang out. The speaker was the local Yangzhou bully, son of the Jiangnan Commerce Association, Vice President Zhao Feng. At this moment he was insolently stepping on a long bench with his foot surrounded by several thuggish-looking attendants clearly sent by rival restaurants to deliberately cause trouble. Go, call out your shopkeeper. If you can't explain why this dish is so expensive, this young master will smash the sign of your Cloud Beyond Tower today and make sure you can't survive in Yangzhou City. Zhao Feng shouted arrogantly, and the diners around hurriedly moved away, afraid of getting into trouble. Kuai-Wei's face turned pale with fright, and she clutched my sleeve tightly. Miss, the Zhao family has enormous influence in Yangzhou. Should we perhaps just pay them off to avoid disaster? Pay them off to avoid disaster? That is a play for the weak. I sneered coldly, unhurriedly straightened my clothes, hung the rosewood abacus at my waist, wore an impeccable professional smile on my face, and slowly walked down the stairs. The most important lesson modern workplace taught me when facing clients or competitors making unreasonable demands: you absolutely cannot lose in momentum, and your logic must be rock solid. Young Master Zhao, this Buddha jumps over the wall is expensive because of two words: Fei time, Fei, and Fei pains. Staking effort. Fei. I walked to the table and curtsied neither humbly nor arrogantly. My voice was clear and crisp, without the slightest timidity, ensuring that everyone in the hall could hear me. I pointed at that steaming bowl of fragrant, rich soup and spoke eloquently. The abalone used must be top-zang grade, dried in the South Sea for over 3 years, rushed here to Jiangnan by fast horses, the old chickenum, and dried scallops must be simmered over low heat for 7 days and 7 nights, during which the water must be changed 12 times, skimming off all floating oil, leaving only the purest clear broth. The heat control in this process: a fraction less and it becomes fishy, a fraction more and it becomes murky. I leaned forward slightly, my gaze fixed directly on Zhao Feng's evasive eyes. the corners of my mouth curling into a mocking arc. That spoonful you just drank, young master, wasn't just soup. It was the ultimate dedication of dozens of top chefs and over 100 hours of work. If you find it too expensive, you're welcome to turn left out the door and go across the street for a bowl of minced meat soup that costs 3 wen. Why bother coming to Cloud Dambion Tower and showing off your ignorance in front of all the distinguished guests of Yangzhou City? As soon as these words were spoken, several suppressed chuckles immediately came from the surroundings. Those wealthy merchants who had been watching the spectacle now looked at Zhao Feng with a hint of contempt in their eyes. Zhao Feng, publicly choked by my words until his face turned red with embarrassment, flew into a rage and swept the teacup in front of him to the floor, roaring, "You insignificant merchant woman, how dare you lecture this young master, smash it for me." Just as those attendants were about to make their move at that critical moment, from the stairway corner, a cold, murderous yet extremely penetrating cough suddenly rang out. "Cough, if you think it is too expensive, then get the hell out. Don't stay here and ruin this official's appetite." Everyone looked toward the sound, only to see a young man wearing dark purple regular attire, his figure straight as a pine tree, slowly descending the stairs. His face was coldly handsome, his nose bridge-high and prominent, and those eyes were as deep as a millennia Jan old cold spring, without a trace of warmth. In his every gesture and movement, he exuded a terrifying aura of authority, the kind that comes from long occupying a position of power, commanding respect without anger. The moment Zhao Feng saw this person, his originally arrogant demeanor was instantly doused like a bucket of ice water had been poured over him. His legs went weak, and with a thud he actually dropped to his knees on the ground, stammering, Lord Pei, why are you also in Yangzhou City?" Sisters spam perfect match in the chat. Our male-led Pei Jingxing has finally made his entrance. This is true alpha energy. He is not arrogant and blind like Shen Yao. He saw through Yunxi's disguise at a glance, seeing the ambition and intelligence in her bones. That earlier scene where Yunxi dealt with Zhao Feng was a perfect score for modern crisis management. Composed and dignified, crushing him directly with product craftsmanship and brand story. The way Pei Jingxing looks at her is definitely not looking at an ordinary merchant's wife, but at an equal rival. This is the enemies to lovers' fey power, couple dynamic we live for. The man called Lord Pei completely ignored Zhao Feng on the ground, and instead walked straight through the crowd, his gaze passing over everyone to land directly on me. His gaze was extremely aggressive, yet carried a sense of scrutiny. His eyes lingered on my face for a moment, then moved down to rest on the small rosewood abacus hanging at my waist. A trace of faint interest flashed in his eyes. Then he spoke indifferently, "Shopkeeper Yun. This dish is cooked to perfection. Bring this official 2 more servings." As soon as he said this, the entire venue erupted. A high Dan-ranking court official personally endorsing it. Yun Wailu's reputation was now completely secured. Zhao Feng didn't dare make a sound, fleeing the restaurant with his attendants in a panic. I looked at this Lord Pei who had come to my rescue, and information about the Imperial court from the original owner's memories quickly flashed through my mind. In the Great Zhou dynasty, there was only one young official who could make the local tyrants of Jiangnan so fearful, wore dark purple official robes, carried such extraordinary bearing, the legendary upright and incorruptible censor who couldn't be swayed by bribes or intimidation, who wouldn't even give face to the princes. Pei Jingxing. What was he doing here in Yangzhou City on a private inspection tour instead of investigating corrupt officials in the capital? My heart skipped a beat, and alarm bells rang loudly in my mind. But my expression remained flawless. I personally brought over a pot of top-10 grade pre-Dan rain, Longjing tea, and elegantly poured it for him, the tea making crisp sounds as it filled the cup. "Thank you for coming to my rescue. Lord Pei, today's meal is on me," I said softly. I wouldn't call it a rescue. Pei Jingxing picked up the teacup, his long and strong fingers caressing the edge of the white porcelain cup. His voice was deep and extremely magnetic, as if it could strike at one's heartstrings. "I simply detest commotion. However," he suddenly looked up, those sharp eyes staring at me intently like a hawk, as if trying to see right through me. A young woman with a pure capital city accent, carrying a massive fortune in flying money, alone in Yangzhou, opening such a grand and innovative tavern. "Shopkeeper Yoon, you're quite bold. Just who are you?" He recognized that I came from the capital, moreover. He might have already guessed my identity, facing this Yusha lord who wielded immense power in the court and possessed profound strategic wisdom. I knew any lie would be futile. I didn't back down. Instead, I smiled subtly and met his gaze without the slightest evasion. "My lord jests, though the capital is prosperous. It is like walking on thin ice. It can trap a canary but cannot nurture a true phoenix. The gentle rains of Jiangnan are more suitable for growing flowers and vegetables, for achieving great ambitions." I pushed the exquisite pastry plate named Splendid Future toward him, my tone carrying both testing and confidence. "Since my lord has come, why not taste this splendid future? Consider it this humble woman's filial offering to you. As for who I am, my lord need only know that I am a lord's and abiding, taxed and paying merchant of good conscience." Jingxing looked at me, and on that face, which was always cold and ruthless, which struck terror into all officials, the corners of his lips curved up almost imperceptibly into the faintest of arcs. It was the smile of meeting a worthy opponent. How apt, walking on thin ice, and splendid future. Jingxing looked at me deeply, set down his teacup, and left behind an ingot of gold. "Shopkeeper Yun, the waters of Yangzhou run very deep. I hope your calculations can continue to be this shrewd." With that, he turned and left, his dark purple cloak cutting a sharp arc through the air. I watched his retreating figure, my hand gripping the abacus tightening slightly. I had a strong premonition that my intersection with this iron Dan-faced censor had only just begun, and this business war in Jiangnan was about to usher in truly turbulent changes. In the days that followed, Cloud Beyond Tower completely exploded in popularity throughout Yangzhou City, having witnessed all sorts of marketing tactics in the modern era. Combining them with the already prosperous commercial environment of the Great Zhou dynasty was simply a dimensional reduction strike. I first rolled out the Fei Jade token membership system Fei. Traditional restaurants always treated whoever paid the most as the boss. But I did the opposite. I spread the word. Any distinguished guest who prepaid 500 taels of flying money at Cloud Beyond Tower in one go could receive a Cloud character Jade token carved from Hettian Jade, symbolizing their status. Guests possessing the Jade token could not only enjoy the absolutely private, non-gem public exclusive private rooms on the 3rd floor, but also get priority access to Taste Cloud, Beyond Tower's monthly limited edition of 10 servings of hidden dishes. This combination of hunger marketing and identity recognition precisely exploited the psychology of Jiangnan's wealthy merchants and noble ladies who loved to compete and show off. For a time, Cloud Beyond Tower's Jade tokens became priceless treasures. Later on, this small Jade token even became a gateway pass to Yangzhou City's upper Dan class circles. If a wealthy merchant hosting guests couldn't produce a Cloud Beyond Tower Jade token, they'd be too embarrassed to hold their head up in the Merchant Association in just 1 month, relying solely on prepaid membership fees. I recovered a massive cash flow. Not only that, in order to expand market share, I also activated the ISO Huan food delivery service that originally existed in the Great Zhou dynasty, but thoroughly modernized and improved it. I didn't hire those strong and sturdy sedan chair carriers who charged high prices, but specifically recruited dozens of able Dan-bodied men and vagrants in the city who couldn't find work due to disability, old age, or poverty. I uniformly provided them with waterproof oilcloth vests, printed with the 2 characters Yunwei specifically to provide errand delivery service for wealthy families within Yangzhou City. To ensure the quality of the dishes, I had carpenters rush to make a batch of special double Dan layered insulated food boxes, with the bottom layer padded with pebbles boiled thoroughly in hot water and thick cotton cloth. No matter how heavy the rain in Yangzhou City, as long as customers placed orders, delivery workers wearing uniforms would shuttle through the streets and alleys, ensuring that when delivered to the customer's residence, the soup was hot and the dishes were fragrant. This delivery team, jokingly called the Yun Family Army by the people of Yangzhou, not only allowed me to monopolize the high-end dining delivery market, but also invisibly gave me control over Yangzhou City's largest and most grassroots intelligence network. And just as I was frantically amassing wealth and building a commercial empire in Jiangnan, the cold winter in the capital arrived earlier than previous years. Inside the general's mansion, it was as cold as an ice cellar. Shen Yao sat in his study wearing last year's old fox fur, looking at a basin of inferior black charcoal that only produced smoke without fire, coughing repeatedly from the choking fumes. "Steward, what is going on with this charcoal? Why is it so suffocating?" "Didn't I tell my wife to buy the finest silver thread charcoal?" Shen Yao furiously threw the military book in his hand onto the floor. The old steward replied with a bitter face trembling. "General, this was bought by Miss Lin. She said silver thread charcoal was too expensive, costing 10 taels of silver per basket, while this black charcoal only costs 1 tael. Miss Lin said we should practice frugality in managing the household, so she bought a cartload of black charcoal back." Practice frugality in managing the household, Shen Yao trembled with rage. He suddenly remembered that when Yunsi was around before, the study always burned smokeless silver thread charcoal, and hot ginseng soup was always prepared on his desk. He had never worried about these trivial matters, and had even despised Yunsi for reeking of money, only knowing how to handle everything with cash. Now, his beloved white moonlight was managing the household. Lin Wanru was indeed aloof and untainted by money matters, because she had absolutely no idea about market prices. When she went to buy charcoal, she was deceived by unscrupulous merchants with the most inferior firewood charcoal, wasting the mansion's remaining few dozen taels of silver. When she went to buy vegetables, she couldn't even tell the difference between scallions and chives, bringing back nothing but rotten leaves. What made Shen Yao even more devastated was that yesterday several colleagues from the Ministry of War hinted they wanted to gather at the general's manor. In the past, Yunsi would have arranged everything perfectly, using the finest banquet to earn him plenty of face. But now Shen Yao could only bite the bullet and make excuses about being unwell, not even daring to open the main gate, fearing his colleagues would see the general's manor in its current shabby, impoverished state. "Yao Gege." Lin Wanru walked in carrying a bowl of half-jan cooked noodles, her eyes red, clearly just having been smoked by the fire. The charcoal fire wouldn't light properly, so Wanru personally cooked noodles for you. Please eat them while they're hot. Shen Yao looked at that bowl of clumped, jan-together noodles, without even a drop of sesame oil, then at Lin Wanru's face. Originally pure and refined, but now smudged with black soot. And that filter in his heart called love was finally blown to pieces by the cold wind of reality. He suddenly missed immensely that woman he had driven away with his own hands, but he absolutely refused to admit he regretted it. Gritting his teeth, he thought darkly, Yunsai is just a weak woman taking money outside. She'll surely be swindled clean. Before long she'll come back to the capital crying and begging him to take her in. Unfortunately, Shen Yao would never live to see that day. In just half a year, Yunwai Tower not only established a firm foothold in Jiangnan, but its daily revenue flowed endlessly like the waters of the Yangtze. My business empire had expanded from a single restaurant to cloth shops, grain stores, and money houses. However, when a tree stands out in the forest, the wind will surely destroy it. The prosperity of Yunwai Tower had finally pierced the eyes of certain powerful figures. Wan Dequan, the president of the Yangzhou Chamber of Commerce, was accustomed to running roughshod over this area. He had initially thought that I, a lone woman from the capital, was merely relying on some novel tricks to make a living and would sooner or later come to pay respects at his dock. But he never expected that in just half a year I would firmly grasp 60% of Jiangnan's high-end dining and liquor supply in my hands, and even more than half the business of the restaurants under his name had been stolen away. Wan Dequan couldn't sit still any longer. He first secretly applied pressure, forbidding all the vegetable farmers and meat vendors in Yangzhou City from selling ingredients to Yunwai Tower, attempting to cut off my supply chain at the source. But he had no idea that early on, before even opening for business, I had used a large sum of cash to directly purchase 3 large farms outside the city, implementing a vertical supply chain of self-dan production and self-dan sales. His blockade was completely painless to me. Seeing that underhanded tactics were ineffective, on this day, Wan Dequan finally tore off all pretense and personally came calling. He brought several burly attendants with him, swaggering into a private room on the 2nd floor of Yunwai Tower, his triangular eyes revealing shrewd and vicious calculations. Manager Yun, doing business is all about first come, first served, and harmony brings wealth. You've been stealing too much limelight these past 6 months. Wan Dequan rotated the walnuts in his hand with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Especially that Izuo Huana and service of yours. How many street vendors' livelihoods have you cut off? This Yangzhou city has its rules. Shouldn't you pay the guild some membership fees and give up 30% of the shares, so this old fool can smooth over the gossip outside for you? This wasn't collecting membership fees. This was blatant robbery. I sat across from him, leisurely playing with the red sandalwood abacus in my hands. The click-dan-clack of the beads sounded especially crisp in the quiet private room. I stopped my hands and laughed brazenly, my gaze instantly becoming sharp as a blade. President Wan flatters me, however. I won't give up a single share of these stakes. I stood up, pressed both hands on the table, and looked down at him. President Wan says I've cut off others' livelihoods. Quite the opposite. In my errand Dan running team, there are 30 war veterans injured on the battlefield, and 50 refugees from the western slums who can't afford a meal. I pay them wages, buy them winter clothes, let them feed their families. I let out a cold laugh and directly slapped a big hat of government righteousnesses on his head. Right now, the situation up north is unstable, and the authorities are worried about having nowhere to settle the refugees and poor households. It is a huge hidden danger. What I'm doing is solving problems for the people and sharing the burden of governance with the magistrate. If the guild president thinks this is inappropriate, thinks I'm breaking the rules, feel free to go beat the drum at the magistrate's office and file a complaint. We'll let the magistrate judge whether he sides with your shady membership fees or with the livelihood and stability of Yangzhou City. Wan Dequan was stunned by my combination of soft and hard tactics. His old face turned beet red. He never expected that a weak woman like me would keep talking about the people's livelihood and social stability, completely refusing to play by the unspoken rules of the Merchant Guild. How could an ancient local tycoon have ever encountered these modern PR tactics of moral blackmail and government jam business alignment? He slammed down his teacup heavily, abruptly stood up, lowered his voice, and bared the fangs of a shrewd merchant. Shopkeeper Yun's tongue is indeed sharp. However, this old man has heard that you're not only running a restaurant, but also buying up old grain on the market in large quantities, and even secretly purchasing special strategic materials at high prices. Wan Dequan stared at me intently, trying to find a trace of panic on my face. Now that war is about to break out in the Northern Territory, the court is strictly controlling supplies. Privately hoarding grain and strategic materials is a grave crime that implicates 9 generations of your family. Aren't you afraid that Yuan Wailu, which earns a fortune daily, will be reduced to nothing overnight, and that you, this beautiful proprietor, will be thrown into prison? My heart suddenly tensed up. Since the other party mentioned the Northern Territory and strategic materials, it meant that my arrangements in the dark web had already caught the attention of the high-gen level commercial circles in Jiangnan, but my face remained impenetrable, and even my breathing frequency didn't change. I chuckled softly, picked up my teacup, and took a sip. President Wan is quite well, Dan informed. However, this commoner woman buys old grain to distribute as salary rice to the hundreds of errand workers under my command, and the tenant farmers at the estate. I buy supplies to make iced wine in summer, to entertain distinguished guests. As for whether it is a grave crime or not, the laws of Great Zhou will make that judgment, so there is no need for the president to worry. See the guest out. After sending away the furious Wan Dequan, He turned back to the inner room, me brows tightly furrowed. I wasn't afraid of the Chamber of Commerce's threats, but my private stockpiling of materials absolutely couldn't be exploited by those with ulterior motives. A commercial empire needs not only gold, but also extremely powerful political momentum for protection. And this momentum was right here in my tavern. That Iron-Jan-faced censor, Pei Jing-xing, had somehow become a regular at Yuanweilu. He never interfered with my business, nor did he bring any attendants. Every few days, he would come dressed in plain clothes and sit at that fixed window seat on the second floor. He'd order a pot of clear tea and 2 small dishes, quietly gazing at the scenery of slender Westlake outside the window. Sitting there for half a day, I knew he was observing me, and I, too, was testing him. This was an extremely subtle understanding. We were like 2 apex predators entrenched in different territories, mutually assessing each other's strength, searching for an opportunity to cooperate. That evening, a fine freezing rain began to fall from the sky. I personally carried a plate of newly developed dehydrated vegetable chips and a pot of warm rice wine to Pei Jing-xing's table. Lord Pei, the winter rain in Jiangnan is damp and cold. Have a cup of warm wine. I naturally sat across from him, pushing over that plate of seemingly unremarkable vegetable chips. Pei Jing-xing put down the documents in his hand, those profound eyes quietly watching me. He didn't touch the wine cup, but instead picked up a piece of the shriveled vegetable and sniffed it near his nose. Proprietor Yoon's restaurant has always sold only exquisite items. These shriveled and coarse vegetable leaves probably don't match the reputation of Yunwei Tower, do they? His voice was cool, yet carried a hint of inquiry. Sir, you do not understand. Although these vegetable leaves are withered, they can restore their original verdant color with just a soak in boiling water. Not only are they easy to preserve, but they're also light and portable. I looked straight into his eyes and said word by word, if placed in a merchant caravan, they can prevent spoilage. If placed in the knapsacks of soldiers marching and fighting in war, they can save countless lives when heavy snow blocks the mountains and provisions are cut off. Pei Jing-xing's pupils contracted slightly. He looked at me deeply, and in that gaze there was less scrutiny and more of an undisguised amazement and admiration. He clearly understood the deeper meaning behind my words. He picked up his wine cup, took a light sip of the warm yellow wine, and suddenly said out of nowhere, "The Minister of Revenue has been replaced. The newly appointed minister is a pedantic scholar who only knows how to strategize on paper. The snow up north this year came earlier than in previous years and has already frozen many cattle and sheep to death. The court's grain and provisions allocation has fallen into great chaos." He seemed to be casually chatting about court affairs, but I knew he was passing me top-down secret intelligence. I listened intently, my heartbeat suddenly accelerating, but my brain was frantically processing the information. "Fei, thank you for your guidance, me lord." I fiddled with the rosewood abacus at my waist, me voice extremely low, yet revealing a hint of crazy ambition. "The silk shop under this commoner's name has recently been rushing to produce a batch of moisture-down-proof sleeping bags with duck-down filling inside and waterproof tongue oil coating outside. This commoner is a businesswoman who only knows that rare things are precious. The greater the wind and snow, the higher the value of these cold down weather items." Pei Jing-xing looked at me and suddenly let out a low laugh. That laugh resonated from his chest, carrying a kind of ultimate pleasure of meeting a worthy opponent. "Yun Si." He called my name for the first time, his voice low and hoarse, carrying an inexplicable bewitchment. "Do you know that the way you are right now looks exactly like a fox preparing to devour the world?" He leaned forward slightly, his slender fingers tapping lightly on the tabletop. "Wonderquan wants to use the crime of privately hoarding grain and fodder to bring you down. But he doesn't know that what you're hoarding isn't grain and fodder, but bargaining chips that can leverage the power structure of the Great Zhou Court." Then, Lord Pei. I met his gaze without backing down, or eyes meeting in the air as if sparks were flying. "Are you planning to capture this fox and bring it to justice? Or are you planning to conspire with this fox to take over the world?" Pei Jing-xing didn't answer immediately. He stood up, placed the gold ingot used for payment on the table, and casually took away that plate of dehydrated vegetables. When he reached the stairway, he stopped without turning back and said, "A snowstorm is coming. Proprietor Yoon, guard your chips well. I Pei very much look forward to your hide-and stakes gamble." Watching his figure disappear into the night, I let out a long breath. Me palms were actually slightly sweaty, this kind of intellectual confrontation that requires no bullshit, where a single glance is enough to understand each other's ambitions, is more intoxicating than any sweet talk. A bold and crazy plan took complete shape in my mind. Shen Yaoyo think I'm just opening a restaurant in Jiangnan to make some pocket change. Little do you know, in this era when financial power accumulates to its extreme, when capital and military supplies combine perfectly, that becomes the supreme power capable of overturning the entire landscape and dominating life and death. The first heavy snow of late autumn came a full half-month earlier than usual. That night, I was in the inner chamber of Yunwei Tower, tallying the exponentially growing figures in the account books by the light of an oil lamp. The densely packed numbers in the account book are tedious symbols in others' eyes, but in mine they're a magnificent blueprint gradually unfolding. After half a year of intensive cultivation, the Yun family's commercial empire has extended from the initial single restaurant to silk shops, grain stores, money houses, and a logistics and errand network spread throughout Jiangnan. The cash flow I control is already enough to make the entire Yangzhou Chamber of Commerce take notice. Kuai Wei walked in carrying a bowl of steaming hot lotus seed soup, her expression somewhat off, hesitant to speak. I didn't even look up, continuing to fiddle with the abacus. "Miss..." Kuai Wei bit her lip. "A letter has arrived from the capital. It is news from Lua, the informant we left in the capital." Only then did I put down the abacus and take the letter that was tightly sealed with oil paper. The content of the letter wasn't long, but each word was like a heavy stone smashing down on my heart. The northern border, war had broken out. The enemy nation taking advantage of the chaos in the Great Zhou dynasty's Ministry of Revenue during its leadership transition, and the resulting confusion in grain supply coordination, assembled Yao-Wulin, Li Nin cavalry troops, divided into 3 routes, and drove straight in, pressing directly toward Jiang Pass. And the Great Zhou dynasty's commander, Jantinjan chief, was none other than that mighty general Shan Yao. However, even more fatal news followed. Due to continuous heavy snowfall in the capital that blocked the roads, coupled with the new Minister of Revenue being an incompetent waste of space, there had been serious errors in grain supply coordination. The military provisions that should have reached the front lines 10 days ago were stuck in the mountain passes of the Taihang Mountains, unable to move according to estimates. It would take at least another half-month before supplies could be delivered, and the tens of thousands of soldiers under Shen Yao's command had already gone without food for 3 days in the bitter cold of the border region. I slowly placed the letter on the table, staring at the flame of the oil lamp, silent for a long time. "Miss... this..." Kuai Wei looked at me cautiously. "General Shen, his life or death has nothing to do with me." My voice was oddly calm, but my brain was already racing at 1,000 calculations per second. "I truly don't care about Shen Yao's life or death." But that sentence Pei Jing-sing said before struck like a heavy hammer, thundering in my ears. If Shen Yao is defeated, Juyong Pass will surely fall. Once Juyong Pass falls, the enemy's cavalry can march straight in. When that happens, this prosperous and splendid Jiangnan will also turn to scorched earth. Can your painstakingly built Yunwei Tower remain unscathed? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Not for Shen Yao. It is for the old members of the Yun family, for this Jiangnan that I've nurtured with my blood and sweat, and also for that Imperial merchant plaque bestowed by the Emperor, one that would make my commercial empire untouchable from then on. "Kuai Wei, go call Uncle Lin, Uncle Zhao, and all the warehouse managers here." I opened my eyes, my gaze sharp as a torch, my voice carrying an undeniable air of deadly seriousness. "Tonight, we're holding an emergency wartime meeting." Kuai Wei was stunned by the sudden imposing aura bursting from me, and hurriedly turned to call for people. I picked up the abacus again and began rapidly calculating a massive wartime supplies allocation ledger, and at the same time, 1,000 miles away in the capital, Another tragedy was unfolding. In the main hall of the general's mansion, Lin Wanru slumped in a chair, clutching an urgent military report sent from the border, her face pale as paper. The general's mansion needs to raise military funds. Her voice trembled. How much? The accountant wore a mournful expression as he pushed a ledger in front of her. Miss Lin, the Ministry of War's directive, is that the general's manor needs to raise at least 50,000 taels on its own for the emergency procurement of cold and weather supplies, to be sent to the northern border with the next batch of provisions. This is the court's customary practice for military families. In previous years, Miss Yoon would have prepared this in advance. 50,000 taels. Lin Wanru's mind went buzz with a sound, completely blank. In the general manor's accounts, adding what she had scraped together over the past half year, there was barely 3,000 taels left in total. She had once mocked Yun Sai for reeking of money, but had never imagined that this towering general's manor, every brick, every meal, every winter garment, was all piled up with silver that reeked of copper. Then go borrow it, Lin Wanru said, forcing herself to stay composed. Go borrow from General Shen's colleagues. As soon as the words left her mouth, the steward's panicked voice came from outside. Disaster. The shopkeepers from the fabric store, rice shop, and coal depot have all come together with their bills to collect debts. They say if we don't settle the outstanding payments today, they'll file a complaint with the authorities. Lin Wanru clutched her chest, her vision darkening. The reason those shopkeepers hadn't dared to come demanding payment before was simply out of deference to Yun Si, knowing the Yun family had money and backing. Know that Yun Si had left, the general's manor's backing had completely dissipated, and these people naturally swarmed over like hawks catching the scent of blood. So Jan called white moonlight is nothing more than that. Without the sustenance of money, that layer of sacred moonlight is nothing but a bubble that bursts at a single touch. On the second night after the battle reports from the northern border spread throughout Jiangnan, Pei Jingxing appeared. He wasn't wearing official robes, but had changed into an extremely practical black nightwear, with deep autumn's cold dew and the dust from a hurried journey still hanging on his cloak. The moment he pushed open the back door of Yunwei Tower, he was already seated at the large table in the inner room, with maps, account books, and supply lists densely spread across the table. Clearly, before coming, he had already been certain I would be here. Yun Si, he got straight to the point, in those usually calm eyes. A flame of barely concealed urgency now burned. The supplies in your hands. Are they enough? Enough. I lifted my head, looking at him calmly. Food, cold jam-resistant sleeping bags, dehydrated vegetables, medicinal liquor, all prepared, just waiting for an explanation. Pei Jingxing froze for a moment, then strode to the table, leaning down to look at the map I had spread out, his gaze revealing a trace of profound admiration and shock. You had already anticipated this. It is not that I anticipated it. It is that I made arrangements in advance. I picked up the abacus and pointed at the densely marked warehouses on the map. The northern border of the Great Zhou dynasty has a war every 3 years without fail. That is a historical pattern. When the Ministry of Revenue changes hands, the grain supplies will inevitably fall into chaos. That is an inherent loophole in the bureaucratic system. I merely did what a rational merchant should do. When others panic, I stocked up on chips ahead of time. Pei Jingxing straightened up, fell silent for a moment, then threw out the bargaining chip that was enough to move my heart. If Shen Yao loses, Jiongwen will surely fall, and Jiangnan will surely descend into chaos. But if you step in, I can guarantee that your Yun family's merchant house will receive the Imperial plaque of royal merchant bestowed by the court. From then on, throughout the Great Zhou realm, in every province and prefecture, no one will dare obstruct your business. He paused, his voice low and firm. Moreover, your father, General Yun's former subordinates, are all currently in the northern border. My hand holding the teacup paused slightly. Father's former subordinates. Those were the brothers earned through father's lifetime of blood and loyalty, the old soldiers in the original host's memory who cried their hearts out at the funeral. I could not care about Shen Yao, but I couldn't not care about them. Deal. I set down the teacup, stood up, me gaze burning. but this batch of supplies, I'll personally escort them. I don't trust the conduct of those court officials, much less their efficiency. Pei Jingxing looked at me, a flash of surprise in his eyes, which then transformed into deep admiration. He took out an exquisitely crafted signal flare from his sleeve, placed it on the table, and spoke with a voice extremely soft yet extremely powerful. If you encounter danger along the way, set it off. I have a private elite force not subject to the court's command, on standby at all times. I picked up the signal flare, placed it in my chest pocket, turned around, and began deploying. Over the next 10 days, I showed the entire Great Zhou dynasty what Fei the terrifying efficiency of modern logistics Fei meant. On the first day, I summoned the managers of the errand-down running network distributed throughout Jiangnan and conveyed the dispatch orders with the highest level of secrecy. The entire network instantly started operating at high speed, like a precisely activated machine. On the second day, grain sleeping bags and dehydrated vegetables scattered in private warehouses throughout Suzhou, Hangzhou. And Jinling began to be broken into smaller batches and converged via waterways toward the main artery of the Grand Canal. To avoid attracting the attention of Wan Dequan and the Jiangnan Merchant Association, each grain transport ship flew the flag of a different trading house and carried seemingly ordinary cloth and porcelain. On the third day, I packed highly purified strong liquor that could be used for disinfecting battlefield wounds into specially made sealed ceramic jars, carefully wrapped them with straw and cotton cloth, filling a total of 300 horse carts. On the fifth day, all supplies completed their assembly at the secret dock outside Yangzhou City, the fleet of ships and convoys stretching for miles. Under the cover of night, uniformly changed to the merchant banners of Cloud Outer Tower and officially set off, travelling day and night, heading straight for the Northern Territory. On the seventh day, Wan Dequan finally sensed something was wrong and brazenly moved to intercept. On the mountain pass that was the only route into the Northern Territory, a large group of mountain bandits suddenly burst out from the dense forests on both sides, surrounding my convoy completely. Shopkeeper Yun, great wealth invites disaster. Leave the grain and supplies behind, and this master will spare your life. The bandit leader rode a skinny horse, wielding a large blade, arrogantly shouting. His eyes were filled with greed, thinking he had merely intercepted a group of unarmed merchants. I sat upright on my tall horse, coldly watching this rabble, my expression as calm as if watching a boring show. I didn't waste words, directly pulling out the signal flare Jingxing had given me from my chest, pulling the fuse and forcefully throwing it toward the sky. Swoosh! The signal flare pierced through the heavy night sky, exploding into a brilliant golden firework at its highest point, illuminating the entire mountain pass as bright as day. In less than the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, the sound of horse hooves from the mountain forests on both sides rolled like thunder, shaking the mountain path beneath our feet. A troop of black Jan armored cavalry roared out from the dense forest, each wielding Jingan spears. The mounted knights were well-gen trained, their gazes cold and fierce, like divine soldiers descending from the heavens. In just a moment, that group of mountain bandits was scattered and subdued, kneeling all over the ground. That was Pei Jingxing's personal elite force, in the face of absolute military superiority. Any conspiracy or scheme seemed utterly laughable. On the 10th day, we arrived outside Jiong Pass. Outside Jiong Pass, the wind and sand cut like knives across the face. It was a kind of cold that penetrated to the bone marrow. The warm breath exhaled instantly condensed into white frost on the eyebrows. Everywhere in the camp were damaged tents. Soldiers huddled under thin military blankets, their faces waxen yellow, their eyes revealing despair and numbness. The air was thick with the heavy smell of rust, the scent of decay, and a silence on the verge of collapse. When I appeared at the camp gate with a convoy stretching for miles, loaded with supplies moving in grand procession, the sentry guarding the gate rubbed his eyes, thinking he was hallucinating from hunger. "Who goes there?" The sentry tremblingly raised his rusty spear, his voice hoarse. "Who are you?" The Yun clan from Jiangnan, delivering military supplies by order to support the troops. I reined in my horse, dismounted with a leap, and strode over to the foremost wagon, yanking off the waterproof tarp covering it. What was revealed was not moldy old rice, but gleaming finely. Dan milled flour, not rotten pickled vegetables, but bundles of golden wind Jan-dried cured meat. Not thin-worn Jan-out padding, but mountains of moisture, Jan-proof cotton clothes and down sleeping bags with full insulation, and boxes upon boxes of well-Dan-sealed medicinal alcohol, reeking of strong liquor. And also, I turned to Kwaiwei, bring up the hot food carriers. Kwaiwei and the women soldiers moved swiftly, carrying bucket after bucket of hot porridge and meat soup, which had been prepared on stoves set up along the road, into the camp. In that moment, the entire camp erupted completely. The soldiers who hadn't eaten for 3 days looked at the steaming food, some trembling as they knelt down, some covering their faces and breaking into sobs. Those cries weren't from weakness, but the sound made only by those who see hope again in desperate straits. When Shen Yao rushed out from the commander's main tent, he was gaunt and haggard, his stubble dishevelled, eye sockets sunken, lips chapped and cracked. That black general's armour, that once made him look heroic and extraordinary, was now tattered and worn, covered in wind and frost. Where was that noble and aloof appearance he had back in the capital when he broke ties with me over his white moonlight? When he finally saw clearly that the woman on that tall horse, dressed in dark purple riding attire, radiating heroic spirit, bringing hope to the entire camp like a deity descending from heaven, was actually me, he was struck as if by lightning, frozen in place, his feet not even firmly planted in the snow beneath him, nearly stumbling and falling. Yun, sigh. His voice was so hoarse it was barely audible, his gaze shifting from shock to disbelief, then to an extremely complex emotion mixed with guilt and hope. He instinctively stepped forward, but was coldly blocked by the crossed spears of the 2 black Jan armoured guards in front of me. I dismounted, not even sparing him a single glance, and directly slapped the thick ledger of supplies into the hands of the deputy general beside him. 30,000 dan of grain, 5,000 sets of duck-down sleeping bags for cold protection, 20,000 gin of dehydrated vegetables, 1,000 jars of emergency liquor, 300 improved repeating crossbows, 50 boxes of thunder cannons. My voice was cold and clear, each word distinct. Please have the general promptly check and sign, so I can take the receipt back to the capital to settle accounts with the court. Yun see you. Shen Yao's eyes reddened, his Adam's apple bobbing, his voice carrying a trembling hope. Did you come personally to this bitter, cold land, risking danger for my sake? I looked at him calmly, with the kind of gaze one uses for a completely irrelevant stranger. General Shen, my voice was cold and clear, like a sword quenched in ice water. Have you been frozen stupid at the border? I tilted my head slightly, my gaze sweeping over his face, full of expectation, my tone without a ripple of emotion. I came here to save the great Zhou's kingdom and state, for the lives of my father's former subordinates, and even more to obtain the court's Imperial merchant plaque, to open up business channels for my Yun family's trading company throughout the nation. I stepped closer, lowering my voice, yet cold as iron, each word like carving a wound in his heart. When I signed that divorce agreement, it wasn't because I blamed you, nor because I was resentful, but because I simply didn't care about you anymore. This batch of supplies I'm selling to the court at twice the market price, without a penny's worth of sentiment mixed in. Whether the Shen family falls apart, whether Lin Wanru knows how to manage a household, has nothing to do with me, Yun Si anymore. This delusional man Shen Yao is really too hilarious. Wishful thinking isn't an antidote. He actually thought Yun Si came to seek her husband from 1,000 miles away. Please, she came to be a national defense military supplier. Have you been frozen stupid at the border? This line is absolutely the best punchline of the whole scene. Yun Si perfectly combines a merchant's rationality with patriotic duty, directly trampling Shen Yao's pitiful male ego underfoot. Girls see it clearly once a woman gets down to business. Love isn't worth mentioning at all. Shen Yao's face turned pale in the wind and snow. His lips moved, but he couldn't say a word. I had already turned around and strode toward the wounded soldiers' camp, beginning to direct the accompanying women's army to clean the soldiers' wounds with medical alcohol, cook porridge with dehydrated vegetables, and replace those soaked rags with duck-down sleeping bags. Behind me, Shen Yao stood in the wind and snow, like a broken statue forgotten in the wilderness. By the time the supplies were handed over, it was already late at night. I was in the wounded soldiers' camp, using a dim oil lamp to finish cleaning and bandaging the last wounded soldier's injuries. My hands were stained with dirt, yet my mind was calm. Just then, a rush of hurried footsteps and noisy shouts suddenly came from outside the tent. A deputy general stumbled into the tent, his face deathly pale. "General, this is terrible. The enemy took advantage of tonight's heavy snow, bypassed the front line, and launched a sneak attack on our rear granary. That is our last food supply. If it is destroyed, the entire army will truly be finished." Shen Yao's expression changed drastically, and he abruptly drew his sword, about to rally troops for a counterattack. I raised my hand and directly pressed down on the back of his hand, gripping the sword. "Lord Shen, wait a moment." He suddenly looked at me, his eyes filled with anger and confusion. "Your soldiers have been freezing and starving for days. They just had their first full meal, and their strength hasn't recovered yet." I looked at him calmly, my voice steady. "If we hastily attack now, facing the enemy head-on when both stamina and morale are at their lowest, it would just be a pointless sacrifice." "So you mean we just watch the granary get destroyed?" Shen Yao lowered his voice and said angrily, "Of course not." I turned around and looked at Kuai Wei and the women's army who had been guarding outside the tent. "Kuai Wei, bring those boxes in." Kuai Wei understood and led several strong women to carry the heavy wooden boxes that had been taken from the hidden compartments of the carriages into the tent. The lids were opened, revealing neatly arranged rows of black spherical objects inside, each one tied with a thin fuse. Shen Yao's deputy general leaned in for a closer look and gasped, "These are cloud thunder cannons, improved version of the cloud thunder cannons." I picked one up and weighed it in my hand. Using specially refined firestones from the private mines in Jiangnan, combined with the existing craftsmanship of the Great Zhou dynasty, the impact range is several times that of the ordinary ones, and the fuse can control the timing for precise enemy repulsion. I quickly deduced the battle plan on the map. The enemy is raiding the granary and will definitely take the mountain valley path on the east side. General Shen, you lead the main force in a feigned retreat from the front to lure the enemy into the valley. I'll take Lord Pei's black armored guards and the women's army to ambush in advance on the high ground on both sides of the valley. Once all enemies enter the valley, we'll trigger the clouds and thunder cannons while simultaneously blocking the exit with improved repeating crossbows. Shen Yao stared at me intently, his gaze like he was looking at a complete stranger, or like he was witnessing a miracle that left him too shocked for words. "Do you realize this is a battlefield, not your tavern where you do the accounts? Precisely because it is a battlefield, I'm more aware than you that efficiency and precision are 100 times more important than a Pifu's courage." I didn't waste more words, turned around and strode out of the tent, mounting my horse. That night, the wilderness outside Yuong Pass was lit up red by firelight. The enemy thought they had run into a supply convoy with no combat capability, underestimated us and advanced rashly, swaggering into the valley. They never expected that. What awaited them wasn't panicked fleeing civilians, but continuous clouds and thunder cannons descending from above. Boom, boom, the deafening sound echoed through the valley, shaking the snow on the mountain walls which came tumbling down. Flames shot up into the sky, illuminating the dark night as if it were broad daylight. The female soldiers held improved repeating crossbows, taking turns shooting from the high ground, using the terrain to constantly harass the enemy, preventing them from forming an effective counterattack formation. When Shen Yao led the recovered main force of Great Zhou to flank them from the front, the enemy had already been tormented by my elusive logistics team to the point of exhaustion and complete disarray, with no ability to fight back. A defensive battle that should have ended in a desperate situation was completely reversed in a way that left everyone dumbfounded. The morning after the battle ended, the snow stopped. A faint, pale light appeared at the edge of the sky, dyeing the outline of Yuong Pass golden. I was crouching outside the wounded soldiers' camp, skillfully treating the arm injury of a young soldier. The young soldier grimaced in pain but forced himself not to make a sound, only looking at me with eyes full of gratitude. "There you go." I cut off the thread and patted his shoulder. Go back and rest. Well, don't get it wet. Thank you, shopkeeper Yoon. The young soldier choked up. Are you a deity descended from heaven? I smiled and didn't answer. Heavy, staggering footsteps came from behind me. Shen Yao dragged that long sword behind him, staggering toward me. His armor was torn in several places. His hair hung disheveled across his forehead. He looked like someone who'd been completely consumed by the night's flames of war, leaving only an empty shell. He stood behind me for a long time. So long I thought he'd already left. In the past. His voice was hoarse and low, so soft it was almost scattered by the morning wind. I always thought you'd just circle around the inner quarters, reeking of nothing but powder and perfume, or the vulgar stench of money. I thought someone transcendent and untainted by worldly dust like Wan Ru. That was what a truly good woman should be. He paused, and a bone-gen deep regret surged through his voice. Now it seems, Shen Yao was blind. I never knew there could be someone like you in this world, a remarkable woman who can stabilize the realm with her words and secure the nation with her strength. I didn't even lift my head, continuing to pack up the medicine kit, me tone calm as water. Lord Shen misunderstands. I'm still as mercenary as ever. I've already had the Vice-General list the losses from this batch of supplies and the Cloud Thunder cannons at 3 times market price. The court will settle the account in full. Shen Yao let out a bitter laugh, that sound filled with regret, bitterness, and a desolation with nowhere to rest. As long as we can protect this great Zhou Empire, I'll give you whatever you want. I stood up, dusted the snow off my knees, and gazed toward the rising sun slowly ascending at the mountain pass. The things given by the Shen family, I find them too hot to handle. My voice was cold and firm, carrying a power that left him unable to refute. What I want is not anything you give me. What I want is for all the women in this world to be like me today. Not only able to enter taverns with an abacus, but also to take up sabers on the battlefield, relying on their own abilities to live upright and proud, standing tall between heaven and earth. He stood frozen in place, like a withered tree stripped of all its branches and leaves by the cold wind, while I had already turned around and strode toward my military tent. This battle, I saved not only the old troops of the Yun family, but also secured the most solid military backing for my upcoming nationwide chain of businesses. And the era belonging to Yun Si had only just begun. The day of the triumphant return to the capital was a rare clear day in the Great Zhou dynasty. After days of wind and snow, the capital suddenly cleared up on this day. The azure sky was like a carefully polished gemstone, so clear and transparent it made one's heart feel refreshed. The accumulated snow glinted with dazzling white light under the sun, reflecting the entire Imperial road as if it were a long silver river. The news had spread throughout the capital 3 days ago. Great victory at Jiangnan Pass. The enemy forces retreated 300 li. But what the capital's common people talked about with even more relish was not the illustrious military achievements of that mighty general Shen Yao, but rather a legendary story that left everyone utterly astonished. A divorced woman cast out by the general's mansion, relying solely on her own strength, established a vast commercial empire, Jiangnan, and when the nation faced crisis, funded out of her own pocket to escort 30,000 dan of grain and countless cold dan weather supplies, venturing alone into danger deep into the northern frontier. Not only resolving the urgent crisis at Jiangnan Pass, but also personally participating in the surprise attack that turned the tide of battle. This story is more thrilling than any tale, more heart-stirring than any legend. The triumphant procession moved from the city gate all the way toward the Imperial Palace, with both sides of the royal road already packed solid with citizens who had rushed over upon hearing the news. I didn't sit in one of those showy and impractical tall palanquins that symbolize glory, but instead changed back into a neat and practical outfit of crimson den purple, mounted the tall date den red warhorse I'd brought back from the frontier, and rode at the very front of the entire convoy. The horse's hooves struck the bluestone pavement, making crisp and powerful sounds, each step landing on the heartbeats of the onlooking citizens. Shen Yao rode his horse following from the side and rear. He should have been the well-deserved protagonist of this victorious battle, But now the eyes of the entire city passed over him and fell upon the woman at the very front. Some recognized me and began whispering. Then those whispers turned into gasps of surprise. Those gasps turned into cheers, and those cheers turned into earth-gen shaking roars. It is shopkeeper Yun. It is shopkeeper Yun from Yun Wai Lu. It is her. It is that Miss Yun who escorted the grain supplies and saved the soldiers of the northern border. Miss Yun is mighty. Cheers like roaring mountains and seas surged from both sides. I sat on my horse, spine straight, eyes fixed ahead, a calm and composed smile playing at the corners of my mouth. Kuai Wei rode her small horse behind me, so excited that her eyes were red and her voice trembling. Miss, did you hear that? Everyone in the entire capital is calling your name. I nodded lightly without speaking, but in my heart, a surge of indescribable burning heat rose up. Not because of those cheers, but because I knew that from today on, that Yun Si, who was once mocked as a divorced, abandoned woman, and a mercenary merchant's wife, had completely died. Standing on this imperial road was a woman who had carved out a bloody path in this era through her own wisdom, courage and sweat. When the procession moved to the front of the general's mansion, my peripheral vision caught a familiar figure in the crowd. Lin Wanru stood at the edge of the crowd, squeezed into a corner by several unfamiliar commoners. She still wore that plain white dress, except the hem had been washed until it was faded, and there was a poorly mended tear at the collar. Her face was deathly pale, her eyes sunken deep, and those eyes that were once praised as clear as autumn waters now held only confusion and desolation. She watched me ride past her on horseback, watched the common people around cheer and rejoice for me, watched Shen Yao follow dejectedly behind me under the gaze of the crowd. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Miss, Kuai Wei whispered in my ear, I heard that Miss Lin has squandered the General's Manor's assets into complete disarray over the past half-year. A few days ago, even the Manor's old cook quit, saying he hadn't been paid for 3 months. Several suppliers of the General's Manor jointly filed a complaint with the authorities, saying the General's Manor owes debts and won't repay them. No, the General's Manor's reputation has become a laughingstock in the capital. I kept my eyes straight ahead, not even sparing her a fraction of my peripheral vision in the face of absolute power. Any scheming tactics seemed childish and ridiculous. Lin Wanru's downfall wasn't caused by me, it was caused by her own choices. She chose a man who maintained his dignity with other people's money, chose a lifestyle of getting something for nothing. So when the person supporting that dignity left, all she could face was the bare reality. I had no hatred, nor any pity. I had simply, completely settled accounts with that past, the Imperial Palace, Imperial Study. The Emperor sat upright on the dragon throne. On the Imperial desk before him was a thick stack of memorials. On top were the supply list, wartime accounts, and the detailed blueprints of the improved Cloud Thunder cannon that I had submitted. After the Emperor finished reading, he remained silent for a long time. The Imperial study was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Even the several attending ministers held their breath, not daring to make a sound. Lady Yun. The Emperor finally spoke, his voice steady and authoritative. Though you are a woman, you have rendered service in saving the nation and securing the state. These blueprints, if sent to the court, are worth 100,000 elite troops. He put down the memorial and looked at me with piercing eyes, his tone carrying an emperor's unique appreciation and scrutiny. I have heard that you and Minister Shen have already divorced. I believe that with your merits today, if you are willing, I can issue an edict for you two to remarry and bestow upon you the title of first-rank lady, to enjoy all wealth and honor. What say you? As soon as the words fell, Shen Yao, standing to the side, suddenly lifted his head, a glimmer of rekindled hope emerging in his eyes. His hands trembled slightly as he stared at me intently, like a drowning man who had suddenly spotted a piece of driftwood. In the entire Imperial study, everyone's gaze fell upon me. I didn't hesitate, didn't even pause. I lifted my robe, stepped forward, and on the golden brick floor of the Imperial study, knelt down cleanly and decisively. Your Majesty, My voice was clear and firm, echoing throughout the entire imperial study. This commoner woman seeks no title, no remarriage, and even less the position of lady. This commoner woman risks her life for this audience only to beg your majesty's grace to grant two things. The emperor raised his eyebrows slightly, signaling me to continue. Fei first. I raised my head, my gaze fixed directly on the Son of Heaven, upon the dragon throne, my voice carrying a power that could not be ignored. I beseech your majesty to bestow upon this commoner woman the imperial plaque of Greet, Zhou's first imperial merchant. From this day forward, wherever the Yun family's trading houses reach, officials of every prefecture and county shall not create difficulties without cause, shall not impose arbitrary levies, and shall not encroach upon the Yun family's legitimate enterprises under any pretext. Phase second. I took a deep breath and solemnly voiced the grand aspiration I had long harbored. Here in the most solemn place of the great Zhou dynasty, this commoner woman wishes to establish a school for women in Jiangnan. It will not teach women's conduct or the 3 obediences and 4 virtues, but only business and mathematics, the laws of the great Zhou, and astronomy and geography. This commoner woman wants the women of this realm to be able to read, calculate, and understand the law, to stand upright and dignified in this world by their own capabilities. I pray your majesty will grant approval. The entire imperial study fell utterly silent. That silence was not one of deathly stillness, but rather the kind where everyone needed time to digest after being struck by an enormous shock. Several old ministers exchanged glances, their eyes interweaving astonishment, bewilderment, and even a faint unease. Shen Yao's complexion, in this moment, underwent a silent upheaval. From red to white, from white to blue, from blue to grey, he finally understood completely. That Yun Si, who once had eyes only for him, who was willing to give everything for him, had long since died in the past. The woman standing in this imperial study, in her eyes, there had never been a place for him. Shen Yao. What filled her eyes was the entire realm. The emperor was stunned at first, then burst into hearty laughter. The sound echoed off the dome of the imperial study, shaking loose dust from the beams above. Excellent. What a remarkable woman who wants an abacus instead of an imperial mandate. What grand ambition to enlighten all the women of the realm. He slammed his hand on the imperial desk, his dragon countenance beaming with joy. Granted, today I shall fulfill your wish. Some are known. Draft an edict, bestow upon the Yun clan the imperial plaque first, imperial merchant of the great Zhou, by imperial decree. Furthermore, allocate 100,000 taels of silver from the inner treasury for the establishment of a women's commercial mathematics academy in Jiangnan by imperial decree. I thank your majesty for your great kindness. I kowtowed in gratitude, and the smile I'd been suppressing at the corners of my mouth could no longer be held back. It quietly spread across my face. As I walked out through the palace gates, the setting sun was just right. The golden afterglow dyed the glazed tiles of the entire palace, a brilliant orange gen red, flowing with light and colour. The white marble steps before the palace gates gleamed with a warm lustre under the setting sun. Standing on the steps, I took a deep breath of the cold evening air of the capital, tinged with a faint fragrance of plum blossoms. In my heart was a sense of calm and satisfaction, like dust finally settling. Yun Si. A voice came from behind me. I didn't look back, because I recognized that voice. Footsteps came from behind me, stopping on the steps. Shen Yao stood behind me. The setting sun stretched his shadow long, casting it on the white marble steps, appearing especially desolate and lonely. Sire! His voice was low and humble, with a hoarseness that came after completely letting go of all pride. Back then, I was blinded by greed, possessed by delusion. Wan Rushi, she couldn't bear the hardship. A few days ago, she already ran off with a salt merchant from Jiangnan. He paused for a moment, his voice surging with a difficult den-to-den concealed defeat. The Shen family can barely hold on anymore. The money in the account can't even pay next quarter's military wages. I know, I have no right to ask anything of you anymore. But Sia, if you're willing to come back, the position of legitimate wife will forever be yours. Si Shen Yao in this lifetime will never let you down again. I stopped, slowly turned around, looking at this man who once made the original host exhaust all her love, yet ultimately ended up with a miserable conclusion. At this moment, Shen Yao had already changed out of his armor, wearing an ordinary tindian-colored everyday robe. That robe had a tiny hole at the cuff, clearly a masterpiece left behind by Lin Wanru's frugal budgeting. In his eyes, there was no longer the arrogance and coldness from before, only a kind of pitiable destitution and humility. I looked at him, with no hatred in my heart, no satisfaction, not even a ripple. There was only a thorough relieved sense of calm. "Minister Shen," my voice was calm and clear. "Are you perhaps mistaken about something?" I tilted my head slightly, my gaze cold and direct. "I signed that divorce papers not because I care about whom you dote on, nor because I resent your heartlessness. It is because a man of your caliber is no longer worthy of appearing in my sight. Whether the Shen family falls apart is the Shen family's own business. Whether Lin Wanru runs away is her own choice. These matters have nothing to do with me, Yun Si anymore." I stepped forward, looking straight into his eyes, my voice cold as iron. "If you continue to pester me, once my Imperial merchant signboard is officially hung up. The Shen family's military procurement for next quarter will probably not be so easy to process." Shen Yao's face instantly turned deathly pale, his lips moved. But he couldn't say a word. "Shopkeeper Yun." A gentle yet authoritative voice that could not be ignored came from the direction of the palace gate. "It seems Pei has arrived at just the right time." Jingxing had somehow already been standing by the corridor pillar at the palace gate, dressed in a dark purple court robe that made him appear even more distinguished and unparalleled, his demeanor composed, as if everything here was within his control. He descended the steps, his pace steady and unhurried, walked to my side, and naturally took the brocade box containing the copy of the Imperial edict from my hands, his movements so practiced as if he had done it 1,000 times before. Shen Yao watched this scene, his eyes suddenly bloodshot, and spoke through gritted teeth. "Lord Pei, you and your wife, Fei Lord Shen, watch your words." Pei Jingxing raised his eyes, his gaze cold and thin like a pool of autumn water. "Shopkeeper Yun is now the first Imperial merchant of Great Zhou personally bestowed by His Majesty, and also the most respected close friend of mine. As for the word wife," he paused, a faint arc appearing at the corner of his mouth. "Since Lord Shen has already signed and sealed the document, you should refrain from further tarnishing Shopkeeper Yun's reputation." Fei, he turned his head and looked at me. Those eyes, which had always been as cold as 1,000 Jiangnan and old spring, were now brimming with a tenderness and smile that made one's heart flutter, as if the entire sunset had fallen into his gaze. "Shopkeeper Yun, I've reserved a table at Jusian residence, and prepared the newly arrived Biluochun tea from Yangzhou. May I have the honor of inviting the first Imperial merchant of Great Zhou to discuss some grand plans together." Looking at him, something in my heart quietly loosened. I wouldn't dare claim grand plans. I smiled casually, taking the brocade box back into my hands, then turned and walked side by side with him. "But making money is something we can talk about." Behind us, Shen Yao stood like a crumbling statue, completely submerged in the evening glow and dust of the capital. That man who once haunted the original host's dreams, just like that, forever disappeared from my world 3 years later. The Great Zhou dynasty's first women's commerce and arithmetic academy was officially completed amidst the green mountains and clear waters outside Yangzhou city in Jiangnan. The scale of the academy far exceeded everyone's imagination. The courtyards of blue bricks and black tiles were built along the mountain, with a total of 36 spacious and bright classrooms. The library housed the most complete collection of legal texts, arithmetic works, and business ledgers in the Great Zhou dynasty. At the entrance of the academy, a row of tall ginkgo trees was planted. When the autumn wind blew, golden leaves danced through the sky, breathtakingly beautiful, and at this time I had already planted the flag of Yun's trading house in every corner of the Great Zhou dynasty, from silk and tea in Jiangnan to furs and horses from the northern frontier, from spices and gems of the western regions to fish, salt, and pearls of the eastern sea. Yun's trading house controlled 40% of the entire Great Zhou dynasty's grain and fodder circulation, and 60% of the cotton and silk business. My net worth could no longer be measured by simple gold and silver. On the day the academy was completed, there was no vulgar display of tens and miles and long wedding processions, but there was a spectacular scene of streets emptied of people. The common people of Yangzhou City surged from all directions, packing the bluestone path in front of the academy so tightly that not even water could trickle through. Those first batch of female students, wearing the unified blue academy uniform, stood at the academy entrance, their eyes sparkling with a moving radiance. It was the thirst for knowledge, anticipation for the future, and the desire to control their own destiny. My wedding with Pi Jingxing was set for this day. I didn't wear that kind of heavy, ornate phoenix crown and bridal robe that weighs you down so much you can't lift your head. Instead, I chose a specially made bright red crossed gen collar ceremonial dress, with simple yet powerful cloud patterns embroidered on the hem, not elaborate, but grand and magnificent. Pei Jingxing also wore a bright red ceremonial outfit, standing shoulder to shoulder with me on the elevated platform of the academy. Today, he rarely had that stern look of an iron Dan-faced censor. Between his brows and eyes was a gentle smile, a smile meant only for me, hidden in the depths of his usually cool gaze. Visible only to me, in the very center of the platform stood a massive bluestone monument. What was carved on it wasn't some classic text, nor the great achievements of emperors and generals, but rather a sentence I had written down one night years ago with a brush on rice paper. Wealth can move gods, and can also save the people. The pen can stabilize the nation, and can also determine the world's fate. Regardless of gender, only talent matters. Below the platform, hundreds of female students stood in neat rows, their eyes reflecting those 16 characters, reflecting the two figures standing shoulder to shoulder on the platform. Yunxi, Pei Jingxing stood beside the stone monument, gently taking my hand. His palm was broad and warm, wrapping my hand completely. His voice was deep and resolute. This Pi is willing to use this life's reputation and official fortune to protect your merchant roots, to protect the women of this great Zhou, so that they all have a path to walk. I gripped his hand in return, feeling that solid and powerful warmth, looking down at the energetic female students below, watching the people living and working in peace and contentment in the distant marketplace, a sense of unprecedented fulfillment welling up in my heart. Pei Jingxing. I turned my head to look at him. Do you know, on the first day I transmigrated here, all I wanted was to stuff those land deeds into my sleeve and run away. Pei Jingxing looked down at me, eyes smiling. And then, I smiled softly. I discovered that this world is much bigger and much more interesting than I imagined. Just then, Kui Wei quietly leaned close to my ear, lowering her voice and saying, "Miss, look over there in the crowd." I followed her gaze and saw at the very edge of the crowd a porter with a face full of dust, carrying a heavy cargo box hunched over and struggling through the crowd. That person, I recognized him. It was Shen Yao, because after the battle at the northern border, the court thoroughly investigated the matter of military supplies being cut off and uncovered several derelictions of duty during Shen Yao's term, combined with the general's manor being heavily in debt with no ability to repay. Shen Yao was stripped of his general position and demoted to commoner status. He looked up and, through the crowd, saw me on the high platform. Those eyes that once were coldly arrogant and unrivaled now held nothing but endless regret and despair. His lips moved, as if wanting to say something, but in the end, no sound came out. I calmly withdrew my gaze, without mockery, without pity, without any excess emotion. Some people, some things, when you've truly let them go, you don't even have the interest to look back at them. Let's go. I tightened my grip on Pei Jingxing's hand and turned toward the female students below the stage, their eyes full of anticipation, taking a deep breath. Today is the first day of the academy's opening. I have a few words I want to say to you all. The area below the stage instantly fell silent, hundreds of pairs of eyes all looking toward me. My name is Yunxi. My voice was clear and powerful, echoing among the green mountains and waters. 3 years ago, I was a divorced woman cast out and swept from the door, with nothing to my name, all alone. 3 years later, I stand here, not because someone took pity on me, not because someone gave me charity, but because, relying on my own brain, relying on my own two hands, relying on my own understanding of this world, I walked here step by step. You've come here not to learn how to please men, not to learn how to compete for favor and scheme in the inner chambers. You've come here to learn how to understand this world, how to find your own place in this world, and live out your own value. Remember, I paused for a moment, letting those words sink into everyone's hearts. This world will never pity you for being weak, but it will respect you for being strong. Below the stage, a thunderous cheer erupted. That sound travelled over the academy's blue bricks and black tiles, over Yangzhou City's misty towers and pavilions, over the surging waters of the Grand Canal, drifting away toward even more distant places. Pei Jingxing stood beside me, looking down at me, his eyes brimming with spring den breeze dan-like smiles and deep affection. Yun Sido, you know, the most correct thing Pei has done in this lifetime was sitting across from you in that tavern in Yangzhou City. I turned my head to look at him, and something inside my heart completely gently settled down. Pei Jingxing, I said softly, you owe me one sentence. He raised an eyebrow. Which sentence? Back then at Yunwei Tower, you said you were very much looking forward to my bold gamble. I smiled slightly. Now, do you think this bet was won? Pei Jingxing looked at me, looked at those female students below the stage with flames burning in their eyes, looked at that distant landscape of Jiangnan glittering in the sunlight, and slowly smiled. It is not that the bet was won. He gently tightened his grip on my hand. It is that everything was won. Wow, just wow, please. Allow me to take a deep breath first. This ending is really so exhilarating and passionate. After reading the story of Yun Si, genuinely feel this isn't just a power fantasy novel. It is practically a fey guide to staying clear-headed and surviving in the real world. Fee written for all girls. Lin Wanro in the story represents that traditional type of dodder flower that survives by clinging to others. She thought that as long as she remained delicate and aloof, she could forever receive men's protection. But reality slapped her hard in the face. Without economic foundation, all that romance and poetry simply crumbles before the realities of daily life. When Shen Yao ran out of money, her white moonlight filter completely shattered. And what about our Yun Si? She proved an ultimate truth through her actual actions. Financial independence is your ultimate armor. Facing the betrayal of a heartless man, she didn't get caught up in internal struggles, nor did she bother arguing with the third party instead. She very rationally took what belonged to her and turned around to build her career. She applied modern business thinking to ancient times, from opening restaurants to establishing logistics networks, and finally to monopolizing military supplies and founding a women's academy. She not only saved herself, but also paved a path for women everywhere. Girls' love is certainly beautiful, just like how Yun Sai eventually met Pei Jingxing, who truly understood her, respected her, and was her equal. But love is definitely not our entire life. What truly allows you to stand tall in this world and have a voice is the knowledge in your head, the savings in your hands, and the confidence to flip the table and walk away any time. Just like what Yun Si said in that last line, this world will never pity you for being weak, but it will respect you for being strong. I hope every one of us girls can be the CEO of our own lives. Not clinging to others, not settling. When you shine bright enough, naturally there will be a Pei Jingxing who matches you to stand by your side and view these magnificent rivers and mountains together. Keep shining and keep hustling, my queens. See you in the next story.